You might be a little bit familiar with what Prime Pursuits is, but for those that might not be quite as familiar with what we are and what we do, I kind of wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about the who, the what, the why, and the how of Prime Pursuits. The who. Bob eloquently outlined it this morning. It's all of us collectively working together in the supply chain. It's bigger than one person. It's bigger than one entity. It's all of us collectively together. It's the 1,400 ranchers, the 43 backgrounders, the 10 feed yards, Creekstone, RKF Case Ready plant in Georgia, the DCs and Walmart stores, and all the people that support that. The community is who we are. Prime Pursuits is the community, and you all are part of it. And if you're not part of it, we welcome you to join us. So what is Prime Pursuits? People ask me, BJ, what is Prime Pursuits? Are y'all a cattle feeder? Yes, we buy calves and we finish them, but we're so much more than just a cattle feeder. We're that community that's dedicated to a customer-driven, vertically aligned supply chain that sources high-quality Black Angus cattle, preferably from 44 farms, for the end-to-end supply chain for Walmart. Vertically aligned through the process and the people and the entities, but most importantly, aligned in purpose. I heard it once said, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Folks, we're doing it together, and we're going further than anyone else has before because we're aligned in purpose. So what is that purpose? What is our why? Why does Prime Pursuits exist? We heard it directly from Doug and Sam's vision over 60 years ago. Boils down to helping others live better. Yes, it's got an emphasis on the customer, and it should. That is who we serve. But it's more than that. It's all of us collectively all the stakeholders in the supply chain working together so that we can work better, so that we can live better, and ultimately the customer has access to that high-quality, nutritious, and delicious Angus beef at an everyday low price. So we're the community, we're customer-driven, and the reason we do it is so that others can live better. Okay, so how are we doing it? You've heard reference to the 2016 meeting a couple times. Obviously, it was a big day for us and a big day for the program. We wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for it. But as you heard David and Martine talk about in reference to that meeting, they needed to build trust. They needed credibility in beef. So connecting Walmart directly to the supply chain, directly to each and every one of you, and to help with us, that is how we're helping them establish that trust and credibility. See, trust is not an action, it's a feeling. And credibility cannot be bought, it must be earned. So Walmart answered the call and is standing shoulder to shoulder with each and every one of us because we're aligned in purpose. Walmart's commitment and investment in each of us is the cornerstone. It's the foundation for the 4 pillars of our program. So what are the pillars? Traceability, transparency, predictability, and community. Traceability. Knowing the source of your product. As Bob spoke about earlier, on an individual head unit, not by lot, not by group, not by manifest, each individual head, from start to finish. This hasn't been done at scale before because it's hard. It's really, really hard. But folks, we've done what some others said couldn't be done. How are we doing it? We're working with our friends at IMI through third-party verification and the use of our electronic identification, the EID tags, powered by PI, Prime Intelligence. Claire will speak to more of that later, but it's a critical component of our success. It allows us to track each individual head all the way through and know the performance and quality of each animal. Traceability creates trust and confidence. So once we trace it, we know it, and we trust it, now we can share it. When we share it, we're transparent. Second point, transparency. That's allowing all stakeholders access to the information, not just some in the supply chain, and not just a little bit of data, all the data to all the people that make sense. There's not a lot of sharing done in the current system. Transparency, I think, sometimes gets the connotation to the customer knowing where their food comes from. And we certainly do that, so it's a very important part, and we'll hear later many of the stories of what we're doing to try to tell your story to the Walmart customer. But it's more than that. It's letting the producers know. Your data, we just talked about it this morning, right? Backgrounders, feed yards, Walmart, allowing everyone access to that information. So transparency creates credibility and accountability. So once we know it, and we trust it, and we share it, now we're better informed. Once we're informed, we want to get better. It's amazing, one of the first questions we get asked when we share the producer data is, how do I get better? How do I rank? I love the friendly competitive spirit, but you haven't had access to that information. You have to have access to it in order to get better. So once we're informed, we can make continuous improvement. Now we have the information, now we've got to be accountable. How do we get better? One of the ways we're getting better is through better forecasting and predictability. So the third pillar, predictability. A consistent product is key. We've heard it time and time again. Walmart customer wants it. Walmart wants it. We want it. And ultimately, I know that you want that as well. This industry is hard. There's a lot of variables. As Bob said, I've had the privilege of peeking under the hood and doing modeling for several different types of industries, from healthcare and pharma to oil and gas to manufacturing. And the beef supply chain is by far the most complex system. I think one of the reasons it's so complicated is it's segmented and siloed, and that traceability and transparency up and down the supply chain doesn't happen like it needs to. So once we know it, and we trust it, and we share it, now we need something to put it all together. We need an engine, Prime Intelligence. Again, I'll save the talking points for Claire. But traceability and transparency, coupled with the power of Pi, that allows us to work towards a more consistent product at a predictable cost. Prime Intelligence, the cornerstone of Prime Intelligence is predictability, because predictability allows us to create confidence, and that confidence is what we need in order to improve. Fourth, community. So we have traceability, transparency, and predictability. They stand up our community. They are supporting our community. A community that is dedicated to a shared purpose. The purpose of helping others live better and to give the customer access to high quality, nutritious, and delicious beef at an everyday low price. Some of you may be familiar with a Belgian draft horse. It's a big, stout horse, much like a Clydesdale. One Belgian draft horse can pull 8,000 pounds. If you take two Belgian draft horses, it doesn't pull 16,000 pounds, it pulls 22,000 pounds. Now, if you take those two horses and they work together, and they train together, and they work towards a united purpose, they don't pull 16,000 pounds, it doesn't pull 22,000 pounds. Together, they pull 32,000 pounds, twice what they could individually. Folks, if we work together, if we communicate and collaborate with one another, we can do more together. There's so many stories of collaboration up and down the supply chain that's making us efficient and effective, allowing us to be better together. Better together because we're united in purpose, driven by passion. United in the purpose of helping others live better and customers getting access to high quality, all natural beef at an everyday low price. It takes a whole community. Again, no one person or entity or segment is bigger than the other. However, the cow-calf operator is a vital role. It's our biggest role. There's over 1,400 of them in the system. You know, we were riding around, Nick Wilkinson, you'll hear from him later, we were driving around in Nevada, felt like 250 miles away from a gas station. It could get pretty remote out there. And we're talking, and he goes, you know, BJ, I work 364 days a year to get paid on the 365th. The transaction that we make when you market your cattle and when we buy your cattle, we know it's important. But that transaction is not a transaction. It's an invitation to the community that we have. And the man that's responsible for doing that each and every day is our Chief Procurement Officer, Warren White. Warren?
Thank you, BJ. I'm the cowboy in this lineup, and I'm going to do it a little different. First off, I'd like to thank you guys for being here. You producers, it starts with you, each and every one of you. Appreciate the feed yards that came today. We got most of them here. Good representative of the backgrounders. 3 of my procurement teams here. Brad Germanson, Todd Eberly, and Brent Cavanis. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you video reps that are instrumental in helping us with this supply, particularly with the 44 genetic side of it. And we've got a couple of trucking companies here, Paul Radloff with Agar and Kurt Clark with Clark Trucking. Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got this going and a little bit of the history of it. Bob and I first got acquainted when we started feeding their 44 stakes cattle. They were looking to expand the program, and feed yard I was at, we're feeding a lot of program cattle, verified natural, NHTC, GAP. And so we fed cattle. We started feeding for those cattle for those guys 12 or 13 years ago, and I got to know that team and probably had as much respect for the 44 Farms team as any customer we had ever had in my 30 plus years at Mac 6. And so I was aware of his vision of tying in with a retailer at some level. And so you can imagine his excitement when Walmart came to that meeting in Cameron and met in the bull barn. The second meeting that happened, the Walmart delegation, including David and Ryan, came to Hereford, Texas. And we drove around the feed yard. We talked about beef production, looked at the cattle in the 44 Stakes program. And then we went to my office and I laid out how I envisioned this working. The next step was a meeting in Bentonville the following month with more Walmart folks, particularly finance, and we got into a lot more details. And a lot of conference calls and more meetings, and it was time to get to work. I want to mention that Bob didn't come to Hereford for that meeting. And I bring that up because it's important that you all know that, because I'm going to bring this up. You've already heard it from 3 different speakers today, and you're going to hear it a lot in this speech. But the reason he didn't come, because he trusted me. Trusted me with that leadership, and that we finally got their interest, and I wasn't going to screw it up. So now we're ready to go. I got to find some feed yards. I got to find some backgrounders. I got to get a supply chain started. Got to find trucks to do all this. And so when I went to feed yards, I didn't go to the ones that had empty pens. I went to the ones that didn't have empty pens. And I met with each one of them. Over half the feed yards we feed at today, I never knew the managers. And I didn't ask for 2 or 3 pens, I asked for 5,000 head of capacity. And how did I get into those feed yards? They trusted me. Obviously, I trusted them. I had to get a network of backgrounders to take care of these calves. I didn't go to the backgrounders that needed somebody. I went to the backgrounders that didn't need somebody. They had a customer base. And I didn't ask for room for a load or two. I asked room for 1,000. And I didn't get in any of them without their trust in me. And I share a meeting I had. We had a lot of producer meetings trying to get the supply chain developed. I want to tell you about one in Malta, Montana. And I think some of those people there are in this room today, 5 years ago. And I described the program to them, what the requirements were, what kind of genetics we're looking for. Spent about 20 minutes visiting with them, handing out handouts. And then I opened it up for questions. And a guy raised his hand and he said, are you going to be at these receivings? I said, probably not. Well, you going to have a representative here when we ship these cattle? I said, probably not. Well, how are we going to get paid for these calves? I said, well, when they land at a backgrounder in Nebraska, I'm going to send you a check from Texas. That, my friends, is trust. This industry has a lot of folks that do big deals on handshakes. It's exciting to be a part of that. And lastly, on the 4 trucking companies we use to haul 99% of the cattle in this program, I didn't ask them to help me with some loads. I said, I want you to haul them all. That was trust, how we got those in here. This is a paradigm-changing program. You've heard that before. 1,400 producers all across the United States, 10 feed yards in 3 states, and 43 backgrounders in 8 states. Every one of you is a joy to work with. One thing I think Walmart learned in this program is when COVID hit, we were just getting started good. Maybe less than 12 months of harvest at that point when that pandemic hit. One thing they learned is the value. I think David alluded to this. I was in backstage, I couldn't hear everything he was saying, but he alluded to this, what the value of an end-to-end supply chain is when you have supply disruptions that we saw during that time. And we learned a lot too. How important our partners are in this community and what collectively we can do together. And I think there is a tremendous amount of growth. David alluded to that, what we're doing here today and what we can be doing in the future. And I had some peers ask me, Warren, how in the world do you do this? I answer it this way. Number one, you've got to have an amazing team. I think we have this talented team as there is in this industry. How you get such a talented team? They all had jobs. You might say more money. I can assure you that's not how I collected this team. What's that word? Trust. They trusted the program, trusted what we were doing, trusted the future of it. And the second thing that allows us to do this is the most advanced cattle management individual system there is in this world, in my opinion. Prime Intelligence, without that tool, there's no way I could manage the inventory, manage the procurement of what it takes to do this 4,300 head every week to Creekstone. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire, and she's going to explain to you what all the amazing things Prime Intelligence does and the work she's put in it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Warren. That kind of made me want to cry a little bit. I've been working on this team for almost 6 years now, and I think this might be the most exciting day of my career so far, because I get to tell all of you guys what I've been working on and what our team has been working on for the past 6 years. So I want to start a little bit with the history, and then I'll move into kind of the exciting things that we've got planned for the future. So what is Prime Intelligence? You've heard a lot about it. Well, really, it's all of the system. It's the system that captures all of the processes and the data that we're gathering for our Prime Pursuit supply chain. And it was custom built by a group of programmers specifically for Prime Pursuits. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how silly we were when we got started. They hired me 6 years ago. I was an analyst. I was going to analyze this Prime Pursuits data. We were just launching the program, and we didn't have any cattle, so we didn't have any data yet. But we knew that we were going to need a lot of data to deliver on those pillars that BJ had mentioned for Walmart, the predictability, traceability, transparency. And so our plan at the time, again, we were super naive. We were going to go to these feeders, and they already collected data, right? They already had systems that they were using. So we were just going to gather all the data that they're already collecting. We were going to aggregate it, and we were going to analyze it. Well, I'm looking at John Schrader right there, and that was a pretty silly idea. Because the reason is, even the feeders who did have systems, a lot of them that we work with didn't at the time, even the ones who did have systems, they could be using the same system. So for example, Micro Technologies is one that maybe you've heard of. We could have 2 feed yards both using Micro Technologies, but using it in entirely different ways. And so when we got this data from these feeders, it wasn't just apples to oranges. It was apples to oranges to pears to grapefruits to watermelons to pumpkins. I mean, it was all over the place. And it wasn't very useful. So we realized pretty quick that we were going to have to do a lot more work than we had planned, and created a Prime Pursuit set of processes for collecting this data. At the time, we had 1 full-time software engineer on the project, and we thought it was going to be a maximum 12-month project. Well, here we are 6 years later, and I'm standing here talking to you, and we're still working on it every single day. And his team has grown from 1 person to now he employs anywhere from 10 to 15 people at any given point in time who work specifically on this project. And so what kind of data are we collecting? I'm sure you're all wondering. So this starts at the producer level. Right now, we're not collecting that much at the producer level, but we are gathering some data from you when we contract your cattle. So for instance, delivery date, expected delivery weight, vaccination protocol. All of that data we will share with the feeders, and so that we can use that to improve the predictability of our supply chain. We're also starting to collect DNA data from producers, and that's really exciting. For those of you who know about DNA data, that's going to increase our amount of data exponentially, and so I anticipate there's a lot of opportunities that are coming down the pipeline with that. Then moving on to our feeders. That's where we collect the majority of our data right now, and that's everything from performance data, feed data, weather data, health data, runs the gamut. All kinds of things we're collecting about those cattle when they're at those backgrounders and feed yards. And all of that data is at an individual animal level. And I'll talk in a minute about why that is so important. And then moving on to Creekstone, we get data back from them about the carcass performance of the cattle. And so all of this together is kind of, if you go back to that last picture, Prime Intelligence is the hub where we're gathering all of this data, putting it together, and then utilizing it to perform on those pillars that BJ was talking about. The reason the individual animal component is so important, and Warren mentioned this in his speech, But Walmart really wants a consistent product. David talked a lot about this. They would like for every single animal to just be a clone, and we know that's not realistic and that's not what we want. But I'll give you a quick example. Let's say we buy cattle from 3 producers, producer A, producer B, and producer C, and they each sell us 100 head. Well, what we do in order to provide the most consistent product possible for Walmart is we commingle those. We throw them all together in one lot. And the industry is historically kind of stuck with this lot philosophy. So you buy cattle from producer A, they stay in a lot, they go to the feed yard, they're in a lot, and then they go as a lot to Creekstone or whatever packer. Well, our program is different because we're mixing all of these cattle together and then we are sorting on them. So we're sorting a big, middle, and a small group. And then we send that big group to Creekstone all at the same time. So that big group is much more consistent than they would be if we just sent producer A's cattle. Well, that's great for Creekstone and Walmart, but if you're the data girl, that is a nightmare because I'm trying to get data back to producer A, and it's all mixed up with producer B and producer C. So the only way we could do this was to do it at an individual animal level. And that's why those EIDs are so critical, and we were not able to find a software program out there that could already do this. Not only do we have all of that data that I already mentioned, but we also have costs on an individual animal level. So at any given point in time, I can tell you that animal out there, I can tell you how much cost it's accrued up to this point in time in its life. And that is super, super powerful. And so I'm a details person, kind of how does the rubber meet the road? How do we use this to make our supply chain more efficient and deliver on these pillars? Well, one way is by the transparency pillar, sharing the data back with other members of the supply chain. Right now, what we're doing from that standpoint is hopefully if you're a producer in our program, you know already that you can get signed up for automated emails to get your carcass data. So if you sell us 1,000 head and we harvest 1 head, you're going to get a report back on that 1 head about how that animal performed. And then when the rest of your animals harvest, you'll slowly collect all of the data. Because we're doing all that sorting, sometimes it can take a while to get all of those animals through the system. So you get that data back automatically. What you might not know is if you reply back to that email, we can also get you health and usually performance data on your cattle as well. So I'd encourage you to do that. It's not automated at this point, but it's something that we'd like to do for everyone. The goal is that within the next year or so, we'll get things automated so that you can get all of that data more readily. And I would love nothing more within the next few years to have all the producers be able to log into PI. Right now, our feeders have access to it. I think there's more we can do from that standpoint as well, and getting more data back to our feeders. But I'd love for producers to be able to go in and access your health, your feeding data, your carcass data, and your DNA information all in one hub, and that hub being Prime Intelligence. Another quick example I'll give is a way we utilize this data is quick example, let's say, this is completely made up, but let's say we buy a lot of cattle out of California, and we know they had a bad drought last year. Let's say we sent those cattle all over the country from Montana down to New Mexico, and let's say that we saw that the cattle in Oklahoma performed far and above way better than the rest of the cattle. Well, maybe there's a correlation there between that Oklahoma feeder and those drought-stricken cattle out of California, and God forbid, if California has another drought like that, we can direct those cattle to Oklahoma because despite the freight expense, the additional freight expense that they might incur, the performance is going to offset that. So that's just kind of an example of, a rubber meets the road example of how we're utilizing this. And we're also doing a ton of forecasting. We're trying to stay on the cutting edge with our forecasting techniques. So we're using things like machine learning. We're working with some consultants to figure out how we could potentially utilize AI. That's artificial intelligence, not the other AI. And so, we want to be cautious about that, but also we want to stay on the forefront so that we can remain the best supplier for Walmart. And I guess, to kind of summarize, to put it all together, I think of this as a big brain. So our supply chain is like a big brain, and we have all these connections, all these little networks going back and forth, and our goal with Prime Intelligence is how do we optimize this brain so that we are providing the most efficient supply chain that we can for Walmart. Quickly, before I'm done, I want to recognize some of our developers, our software programmers. I mentioned that we started with one, and now he employs about 10 people at any given point in time. 4 of those guys are with us today, and they are sitting right over here. We've got Charlie, Michael, Jennifer, and Scott. Can you guys stand up? One of the main reasons we have been so successful in what we've done has been because of this team right here. They are amazing. They have jumped headfirst into this industry, and so I'm just really thankful for how far they've taken us, and I'm super excited about all the things to come, and I hope you guys are all along on the ride with us.